The stars shimmered against the blackness of space as the U.S. Intrepid cruised through what Captain Frank Miller believed was unclaimed territory. Humanity's first true interstellar vessel gleamed under distant suns, its crew filled with a mixture of pride and caution. "Captain, we're picking up unusual energy readings at coordinates 227 Mark 43, said Lieutenant Mary Davis, her eyes fixed on the sensor display. Frank walked over and placed a hand on the back of her chair. "Natural phenomenon." "No, sir. The pattern suggests artificial origin. Very advanced." It was 2157, and humans had only recently developed the Hawking drive that allowed them to reach beyond their solar system. The concept of meeting other intelligent life was still new, exciting, and terrifying. "Adjust course to investigate, but maintain safe distance," Frank ordered. "And alert Dr. Patel. If we found aliens, I want our xenolinguist ready." Little did Frank know, they had just veered into the territory of the Crothan Imperium, a species that had been watching Earth with growing concern for decades. On the bridge of the Crothan warship Victor, Commander Kraz Full observed the human vessel with narrowed eyes. His scaled skin reflected the red lighting of the Crothan bridge. "They enter our sacred space without permission," hissed Sub-Commander Vrex. "It is an insult." Kraz Full raised a clawed hand. "Perhaps they are ignorant of our ways. We will educate them." When the Crothan ship decloaked directly in front of the Intrepid, the human crew froze in awe. The alien vessel was massive, its hull covered in what looked like metallic scales, with glowing red ports that resembled eyes. "Open communications," Frank said, straightening his uniform. "Universal greeting protocol." Dr. Patel rushed onto the bridge just as the main screen flickered to life, revealing the reptilian face of Commander Kraz Full. The alien's amber eyes locked onto Frank, vertical pupils narrowing. "This is Captain Frank Miller of the Earth Alliance vessel Intrepid. We come in peace and friendship," Frank said, raising his hand in what humans considered a universal gesture of greeting. Palm forward, open hand. The Crothan bridge erupted in angry hisses. In Crothan culture, showing an open palm was the equivalent of suggesting the other party was weak enough to be struck down without weapons. "You dare mock us with threat displays," Kraz Full's translator boomed. "You invade our territory and then suggest we are defenseless." Dr. Patel whispered urgently, "Captain, I think there's a cultural misunderstanding." But it was too late. Frank attempted to ease tensions with a smile, showing his teeth in what humans considered friendly. To Crothans, baring teeth was a direct challenge to combat. The Crothan commander stood abruptly. "So be it, human. Your species has made its intentions clear. The Crothan Imperium accepts your challenge." The transmission cut, and Frank looked bewildered. "What just happened?" "Sir," Mary's voice shook, "they're charging weapons." The Intrepid barely escaped, its hull scorched by Crothan energy weapons. As they limped back to Earth, they carried grave news. Humanity had accidentally declared war on a vastly superior alien civilization. In the weeks that followed, Earth Alliance scrambled to prepare defenses. Diplomatic envoys were sent but returned unsuccessful, or didn't return at all. Traditional negotiators from other alien species tried to mediate but reported that the Crothans found human communication patterns deliberately provocative and human behavior insultingly informal. After the Crothans destroyed an Earth colony on Europa, killing 3,000 people, Admiral Sam Jones stood before the Earth Alliance Council, his face grim. 3 battles, 3 defeats. Their technology outmatches ours by centuries. At this rate, humanity will be extinct in months. Councilwoman Betty Wright removed her glasses, rubbing her tired eyes. "What options do we have left?" The Admiral hesitated before answering. "There might be one approach we haven't tried. It's unorthodox, potentially disastrous, but we're facing extinction, Admiral. I think we're past worrying about diplomatic protocol." "Yes, Mom. Which is exactly why I'm suggesting we send someone who doesn't understand diplomatic protocol in the first place. The emergency meeting room fell silent as Admiral Sam Jones pulled up the profile on the main screen. A woman with unruly red hair appeared, wearing a faded t-shirt instead of a uniform, a half-smile on her freckled face. "This is Susan Grant," he said, "former bartender, cultural anthropologist, and the most undiplomatic person I've ever met." General Paul Adams scoffed. "A bartender? Our species is facing extinction, and you want to send a bartender to negotiate?" "Not just any bartender," Sam replied. "Susan has spent 15 years studying alien cultures. She was raised on military bases across Earth and has a knack for solving conflicts through unusual methods." The room's atmosphere grew heavy with skepticism. "What makes her qualified when our best diplomats failed?" asked Councilwoman Betty Wright. Sam pulled up footage of Susan breaking up a fight between a human trader and a Dralaxian merchant on an outpost near Saturn. Rather than using formal diplomacy, she challenged both to an arm wrestling match, with the winner getting a discounted trade deal. "She understands something our formal diplomats don't. Sometimes respect isn't earned through proper channels," Sam explained. "The Crothans see our diplomatic approaches as weakness." Betty leaned forward. "And you think this woman can succeed where everyone else has failed?" "I think we have nothing to lose," Sam answered plainly. 3 hours later, Susan Grant sat across from Admiral Jones in his office, boots propped on his desk, despite his obvious discomfort. "Let me get this straight," she said. "You want me to stop a war with aliens who think we're insulting them every time we try to be nice?" "That's about the size of it," Sam confirmed. Susan laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh, but one of genuine amusement. "And why me? I'm not exactly Earth's poster child for good behavior." "Because you understand people, not just protocols. You know how to read a room, how to find common ground in unlikely places." Susan took her feet off the desk and leaned forward. "The Crothans, what do we know about them?" Sam pushed a tablet toward her. "Reptilian species, highly hierarchical society based on combat prowess. They value strength, honor, and direct confrontation." "Sounds like the regulars at my old bar," Susan muttered, scrolling through the information. "What happens if I fail?" "Then we're no worse off than we are now." Sam's face darkened. "We've lost 3 battles already. Earth's defenses will fail within the month." Susan set down the tablet. "So I have 30 days to prevent humanity's extinction." "That's optimistic, but yes." Susan stood up and paced the room. She had never wanted to be important. She'd been content mixing drinks and studying cultural interactions from the perfect vantage point of a bartender. Yet here she was, possibly humanity's last hope. "I'll need full authority to handle this my way," she said finally. "No diplomatic oversight. No committee approvals." Admiral Jones nodded slowly. "The Council has granted you extraordinary powers for this mission. Whatever you need." Susan smiled. "I need a fully stocked bar and permission to break every protocol in the book." Sam looked alarmed. "A bar? Trust me, Admiral. More conflicts have been resolved over drinks than at negotiating tables." She paused. "And I'll need a ship, something small, not military. Nothing that screams Earth is planning something." Against his better judgment, Sam agreed. "The trading vessel Blue Jay is being prepped for you. It's civilian but has been upgraded with defensive capabilities, just in case." As Susan turned to leave, Sam called after her. "Do you actually think you can pull this off?" She stopped at the door. "Honestly, no idea. But I do know one thing about bar fights that might apply here." "What's that?" "Sometimes the best way to end a fight isn't to win it. It's to turn your opponent into a drinking buddy." 2 days later, the Blue Jay departed Earth orbit with Susan Grant and a small crew. Their destination: Nexus 7, a neutral space station where the Crothans had unexpectedly agreed to one final meeting. Humanity held its breath. placing its fate in the hands of a bartender. Nexus 7 space station hung like a giant metal snowflake against the backdrop of a swirling purple nebula. Ships from a dozen different species docked at its many arms. The Blue Jay slipped into one of the smaller berths, far from the main diplomatic section. Susan Grant stood in front of the mirror in her quarters, frowning at the formal diplomatic uniform the Earth Alliance had provided. "This won't do," she muttered, tossing it aside and pulling on worn jeans, boots, and a simple button-up shirt. She grabbed a large duffel bag filled with bottles from Earth, whiskey, tequila, rum, and other spirits rarely seen in this part of the galaxy. Her small crew looked nervous as she emerged from her quarters. "Are you sure about this approach?" asked Jack Wilson, her assigned security officer. Susan hefted the bag over her shoulder. "Nope, but I'm sure the other approach has already failed." The official meeting room on Nexus 7 was designed for formal diplomatic encounters. A long table dominated the center, with Earth Alliance flags on one side and the sharp, angular banners of the Crothan Imperium on the other. Representatives from 3 neutral species sat at the far end as mediators. When the Crothan delegation entered, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. War Commander Grekthar led them, his scaled skin a deep green with red markings of rank. Standing over 7 feet tall, his presence filled the room with tension. Behind him walked 4 other Crothans, each wearing ceremonial armor that clattered with each step. The mediators rose. "Earth representatives, Crothan representatives, we welcome you to this final attempt at peaceful." The door slid open with a hiss, interrupting the formal introduction. Susan Grant strolled in, duffel bag over her shoulder, 15 minutes late. "Sorry about that," she said casually. "Got lost. This station is huge." Grekthar's eyes narrowed to slits. "This is how Earth mocks us in our final meeting, by sending someone who cannot even arrive on time." Susan ignored the comment and walked past the formal table to the side of the room. She began unpacking her bag on a small side table, setting out bottles and glasses. The head mediator, a tall, blue-skinned Silurian, looked confused. "Representative Grant, the negotiating table is—" "Yeah, I see it," Susan cut in. "Too formal. Nobody ever made friends sitting on opposite sides of a battle line." She continued setting up what was unmistakably a makeshift bar. Grekthar hissed, a sound that made Jack reach for his concealed weapon. "What is the meaning of this disrespect?" Susan finally turned to face the Crothan commander. "No disrespect intended. On Earth, when 2 parties can't see eye to eye, sometimes they need a different setting." She held up a bottle of amber liquid. "This is whiskey. From Kentucky. Older than me." The Crothans looked at each other in confusion. The mediators seemed horrified. "You think we will drink your human poison?" asked one of the Crothan officers. Susan shrugged. "Your choice. But where I come from, sharing a drink is a sign of respect. It means I don't think you're weak enough to be affected by it." The room went silent. Susan had studied enough about Crothan culture to know that questioning strength was a guaranteed way to get a reaction. Grekthar stepped forward, towering over Susan. "You suggest Crothans fear your Earth drinks." "Not suggesting anything," Susan replied, pouring a glass and setting it on the table. "Just offering a chance to talk like equals instead of enemies." Grekthar stared at the glass, then at Susan. Something shifted in his reptilian eyes, a glimmer of curiosity breaking through the hostility. "Your diplomatic methods are unusual," he said finally. Susan smiled. "I'm not a diplomat. I'm a bartender. And in my experience, you learn more about someone from how they drink than from what they say across a negotiating table." To everyone's surprise, Grekthar picked up the glass, studying the amber liquid. "In Crothan culture, we have a saying, know your enemy by sharing their fire." He downed the whiskey in one gulp. The first diplomatic session between humanity and the Crothan Imperium had officially begun. With no formal protocols, no prepared statements, and absolutely no rulebook to follow. 3 days had passed since the first unusual meeting. Susan sat in her quarters on Nexus 7, reviewing notes on a tablet. The first session had ended after 2 hours with no real progress, but no new threats either. The Crothans had been confused, then curious, then cautiously engaged. It wasn't much, but it was more than any previous diplomat had achieved. A message alert blinked on her screen. It was from her Earth Alliance handler. High Command demands progress report. Media asking questions. What should we tell them? Susan sighed and typed back. Tell them diplomacy takes time, even the unconventional kind. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Jack Wilson entered, looking uncomfortable. The Crothans are requesting another meeting, he said, but not in the official room. They want to see what you called a real human cultural exchange venue. Susan grinned. They want to go to a bar. An actual bar. This isn't funny, Jack warned. These aliens have destroyed 3 Earth colonies, and they'll destroy more unless we find common ground. Susan countered. Get your jacket. We're going to the Stellar Drift on Level 8. The Stellar Drift was one of Nexus 7's more colorful establishments. Species from across the galaxy mingled there, united by the universal desire for intoxication and entertainment. When Susan and Jack arrived, they found the Crothan delegation already waiting. War Commander Greg Thar sat stiffly in a booth too small for his large frame. Beside him was a younger Crothan officer Susan had learned was named Drac. 3 other Crothans stood guard nearby, their hands never far from their weapons. You came, Susan said, sliding into the booth across from them. I wasn't sure you would. We are studying human customs, Greg Thar replied. Your approach is unorthodox but intriguing. Susan ordered drinks for everyone. Tonight we're not diplomats or soldiers, just folks having a night out. Drac, the younger Crothan, leaned forward. What do humans do for entertainment in such places? Susan pulled out a deck of cards. Ever play poker? The next few hours transformed the atmosphere between them. Susan taught the Crothans poker, explaining the rules in simple terms. They caught on quickly, especially the concept of bluffing. So you deliberately hide your strength? Greg Thar asked, studying his cards. Sometimes, Susan replied. Other times we pretend to be stronger than we are. Deception as strategy, Drac noted. We have similar games, though with more physical elements. As they played, Susan shared stories of Earth, not its military or technology, but its cultures, celebrations, and oddities. The Crothans, to her surprise, began sharing their own tales. Our world has 3 suns, Drac explained, slightly loosened by the drinks. The Festival of 3 Shadows happens once every 60 cycles when they align. Warriors compete in combat, feasting, and drinking contests. Susan raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a good party. It is sacred, Greg Thar corrected, but without the usual edge in his voice. But yes, it is also enjoyable. As the night progressed, Susan learned crucial information. The Crothans respected strength, yes, but also endurance, celebration, and the ability to both fight and feast with equal passion. Most importantly, she learned the war had started because they believed humans were deliberately insulting them. Your diplomats speak with soft voices and avoid eye contact, Greg Thar explained. In our culture, only someone planning betrayal avoids the direct gaze. Susan nodded. In ours, sometimes it's a sign of respect. A strange way to show respect, Drac commented, but his tone was curious rather than dismissive. Later, when Susan excused herself briefly, she overheard Greg Thar speaking to Drac in a low voice. These humans are not as we were told, the commander said. They do not fear direct challenge. They embrace it through these games. Perhaps they are worthy adversaries after all. Susan smiled to herself. They weren't friends yet, not by a long shot, but worthy adversaries was a significant step up from targets for extermination. When she returned to the table, Greg Thar raised his glass in what appeared to be a gesture borrowed from her earlier demonstration. To worthy opponents, he said. Susan clinked her glass against his. to better understanding. Word of Susan's unusual diplomatic methods spread quickly. After a week of card games, drinking sessions, and what she called cultural exchange, the Crothans had not launched any new attacks on human settlements. It wasn't peace, but it was a pause, enough to give Earth a chance to breathe. Susan was preparing for another meeting when Jack rushed into her quarters. "We've got a problem," he said. "Earth just sent a proper diplomatic team. They're docking now." Susan groaned. "Who authorized that?" "We're making progress. Apparently some officials think your methods are embarrassing and beneath the dignity of Earth." 10 minutes later, Susan stood in the docking bay watching a sleek diplomatic vessel connect to Nexus 7. The airlock opened, revealing a man in a perfectly pressed uniform, with diplomatic corps insignia. His gray hair was neatly combed, his posture rigid. "Ambassador Alan Shepard," he announced, extending his hand to Susan. "I've been sent to take over the negotiations." Susan didn't take his hand. "With all due respect, Ambassador, you're going to ruin everything we've accomplished." Alan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And what exactly have you accomplished, Ms. Grant?" "Playing cards, sharing drinks. The fate of humanity requires serious diplomacy, not barroom antics." "Those barroom antics stopped the Crothans from bombing another colony." Susan shot back. Alan straightened his already straight tie. "I've studied the Crothan cultural reports. They respect strength and formal hierarchy. We need to show them Earth's unity and resolve, not teach them poker." "You've read reports." "I've actually talked to them." Their argument was interrupted by a message from the Crothans. They had requested a formal dinner that evening, with both Susan and the new human representatives. The dinner was held in Nexus 7's Grand Hall. The Crothans arrived in full ceremonial armor, metal plates gleaming under the lights. Susan wore the closest thing she had to formal attire: a clean black shirt and pants. Ambassador Allen and his team of 5 wore official Earth Alliance diplomatic uniforms, with every medal and ribbon they possessed. Dinner began with stiff formalities. Allen spoke in carefully measured tones about mutual respect and cessation of hostilities. The Crothans listened, their faces unreadable. Susan noticed Drac looking bored and Grekthar's tail twitching, a sign of irritation she had learned to recognize. When the first course ended, a Crothan admiral named Vextor spoke. Susan paced her quarters, fuming. After her confrontation with Allen, she had received official orders to pack her things and prepare to return to Earth. All her work, all the progress, about to be undone by diplomats who couldn't see. The event horizon erupted into the most spectacular bar fight Nexus 7 had ever witnessed. The moment Susan's fist connected with the Vexcar's face, more Vexcar leaped from nearby tables. Chairs flew through the air, bottles shattered. Beings of a dozen species dove for cover. Ambassador Allen and his team retreated to a corner, horrified. "You've doomed us all," he shouted at Susan. But something unexpected was happening. As 3 Vexcar rushed Susan, Grekthar stepped in front of her. With a roar that shook the walls, he threw one attacker across the room. "No one challenges our drinking partners," the war commander bellowed. Suddenly, humans and Crothans found themselves fighting side by side. Jack took down a Vexcar with a perfect tackle. Drac used his powerful tail to sweep 2 attackers off their feet. Susan grabbed a bottle and smashed it over the head of a Vexcar, trying to sneak up behind Grekthar. "Behind you," she called. Grekthar spun around. Good eyes, human. They stood back to back as more Vexcar joined the fight. Susan had never imagined she would be fighting alongside the alien who had ordered attacks on human colonies just weeks ago. "You fight well for a diplomat," Grekthar shouted over the noise. "I told you," Susan replied, ducking a punch. "I'm a bartender." The chaos lasted nearly 10 minutes before station security arrived with stun weapons. By then, the bar was destroyed. Tables were broken. Chairs were in pieces. Even the ceiling had a crack from where Grekthar had thrown a particularly large Vexcar. Security officers separated the fighters and recorded everything on their cameras. Susan had a split lip. Grekthar was bleeding green blood from a cut on his arm. The Earth diplomats looked like they might faint. 3 days later, Susan stood before a screen showing Admiral Sam Jones. His face was serious. "The footage from that bar fight has been shared across every system in this sector," he said. "The Earth Alliance Council is furious. You were ordered to return to Earth, not start an interspecies brawl." Susan braced herself for the worst. "Sir, I can explain." "No need," Sam interrupted, his expression softening. "We just received a message from the Crothan High Council." He pressed a button, and a recording began playing. It showed Grekthar, in full ceremonial armor, addressing his leaders. "The humans have proven themselves in both drink and battle," the war commander said. "They do not back down. They do not show fear. And when challenged, they stand with their allies, not behind them." He paused. "We cannot defeat a species that fights with such spirit." The recording ended. Sam looked at Susan with disbelief. "They're offering peace terms. Actual peace terms, with one unusual condition." "What's that?" "They want regular cultural exchange competitions between our species. Something about drinking contests and fighting tournaments." Susan couldn't help laughing. "They want to party with us." 2 weeks later, Susan stood in a newly constructed arena on Nexus 7. Humans and Crothans filled the stands, cheering as competitors from both species engaged in friendly wrestling matches. In one corner, a drinking contest was underway, with Earth whiskey and Crothan fire ale being consumed in alarming quantities. Grekthar approached, now wearing the insignia of a peace commander rather than a war commander. "The first Terran Crothan Games are a success," he said, watching the crowds. "Our people get along better than anyone expected." Susan nodded. "Nothing brings people together like a good fight and a good drink." "The Vexkar are furious," Grekthar added with satisfaction. "They thought they could manipulate us into destroying you. Instead, we found worthy companions." A group of Crothan officers passed by, one turning to Susan. "We lost the war when we found ourselves enjoying the battle too much," he said with what Susan now recognized as a Crothan smile. Susan raised her glass. "To losing the right wars." Grekthar clinked his glass against hers. "And winning unexpected friends." Across the galaxy, diplomats studied what would become known as the Grant method of interspecies negotiation. Traditional experts were horrified, military leaders were confused, but no one could argue with the results. Humanity had survived by sending a bartender to do a diplomat's job, and the galaxy would never be the same.